I got this truck for less than 95 grand. I literally could just go and ship this off to the auction and make $15,000. Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, we're gonna be talking about how you can actually drive a car for free right now. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. However, aside from that, I do want to mention that I will be posting a video soon talking about how to negotiate cars in the current market, since it is a seller's market, and that's going to tie in very well to this video. So if you're not already subscribed, I'd recommend subscribing so you can get notified once that video posts. And then aside from all of that, I do want to mention I am rolling out a new benefit for Patreon supporters. So again, first off, I really appreciate all of you that have supported me via Patreon. Something I'm going to be doing that's a little bit different on Patreon is if you're in the market for a car, or if you are currently negotiating with a dealer and you want to ask me advice and questions and all that kind of stuff, I will be doing that for Patreon supporters only. Again, I really appreciate the support. So if you want to talk to me about the deal that you're currently working on, then go over to Patreon, support the channel, and then I will be doing that. There's a messaging app and everything on Patreon. So basically we can just talk direct on Patreon, and then I'll be able to help you out and answer any questions that you might have. But let's get into the video. Now, to properly explain this, I do have to kind of go back in time to 2016 to 2019 range roughly. And what was happening during that time is new car sales pretty much hit their peak, and then they were in a slow decline. And so what this was doing to the used car market at the time and the new car market is it meant big discounts on new cars and big depreciation on used cars. So chances are if you bought a car in any of those years, then and then you sold it in any of those years, you probably lost quite a bit of money. So like if you bought a car in 2016 and then you went and traded it in 2019, you probably lost quite a bit to depreciation. Now everything changed once 2020 rolled around. Everyone knows what happened in 2020 with COVID, and COVID changed a lot of things for the automotive industry. It restricted parts supplies, it restricted the ability for factories to even put cars together, and because of those two things, the amount of supply of new cars decreased drastically. So that's the first thing that kind of caused values to go crazy, is that not as many new cars were able to be produced. But then on top of that, people stopped traveling via bus, via plane, via train, all the other stuff, because they didn't want to be in public places. And so then demand for cars actually increased when COVID happened, because people still needed to travel to places, but they didn't want to use public transportation. And so you had the situation where new car manufacturers can't build cars anymore, or they're very limited with the cars they can build, and people are buying more cars because, again, they need to travel somehow, but they don't want to travel via public transportation. And this was kind of an interesting situation. So what kind of happened in 2020 is in March, car values actually took a huge dip. And so if you're like me and bought a car in March, chances are you bought the car for pretty cheap, and then a few months later, the car is worth substantially more than what you paid for it. And that's kind of what happened. Is the whole COVID outbreak situation happened here in the US. Everyone freaked out. Car values dipped because people are like, oh, we're not going to buy anything anymore. We don't know what the economy is going to be like. And then by the next month, car values started just increasing every single month. Everything started increasing every single month because people started to kind of realize, okay, the economy is going to be a little bit different, but we can still make money, this and that. And so it was kind of an interesting situation, again, with people not wanting to use public transportation, wanting cars, and then on top of that, realizing that there was still ways that they could work and still make money, so then they could go and buy stuff. Fast forward through all of 2020 to today, and the whole issue with the parts being bottlenecked has not really changed. So most everything is open up. Manufacturing plants pretty much can produce as many vehicles as they would need to if they could get parts, but they're still not able to get parts. And that's the problem with modern manufacturing, is it's not like you get all of the resources in one area and then you build that thing and then you ship it out. Typically how it works nowadays is it's like, okay, we have a part for this component of the vehicle and that's going to come from this country. And then we have this part and it comes from this country. And pretty much every single vehicle nowadays is built from parts that are produced from all around the world. And a lot of these cars aren't even put together all in the same factory. A lot of times what will happen is maybe the cabin will be built in one factory, and then the vehicle will get shipped to another factory to have the engine put in, and then all this other stuff. Like, it's all over the place. And so if anything gets bottlenecked, then it causes huge issues in terms of producing vehicles. And the biggest thing has just been parts supplies. So there's just a lot of things that have had issues with keeping up in terms of production. Right now, as me filming this video, it's microchips with vehicles. And because these vehicles don't have these microchips, most manufacturers are just producing the vehicle, but they don't have all the components for it. And so they just make the vehicle, they set it on a lot. And these vehicles, there's a lot with a lot of these manufacturers, there's just literally tens of thousands of vehicles sitting in these lots just waiting to get microchips, and then they can get shipped out to the customers. And so that's, again, kind of what's still happening is there's just an issue with parts. And so it's causing the values to stay really high because people aren't able to buy new cars. It's really hard to find new cars with most manufacturers. Now, what this means from a market standpoint, again, has to do with supply and demand. So people are still buying just as many cars as they were last year, but a lot of the times they're not able to find those cars new because they just aren't being produced in enough quantity by the manufacturers. So they're having to look at used ones. And because more people are buying used cars, the used car market keeps going up in value, again, supply and demand. And on top of that, just like with a lot of places with houses, there's just not a lot of inventory because so much of the inventory has been bought up at this point. And so it's just caused this crazy situation. Now, what can you do as a consumer now to actually be able to drive a car for free? So first off, all of the same rules that I have said in the past still apply in terms of the vehicles to look for that you should actually end up buying if you want a vehicle that you are going to be able to drive for free. And let's just get into those types of vehicles. So the first thing is production numbers on a vehicle. If a vehicle is produced in massive numbers, typically it'll depreciate at a higher rate. This isn't always true, but this is typically how it is. And so if a vehicle is limited edition in pretty much any way, it's typically going to hold its value just a little bit better. That was something that happened in the past, and that's something that's happening kind of at a higher rate in the current market. Supply and demand, right? Think if you go and buy a car and you can find millions of them used, what's the value going to be on that car? Because if someone doesn't like yours, then they've got 20 other to pick from. But if you have a car that you're the only seller of that car in the entire state or in the entire country, you kind of have a lot more going for you, right? So obviously, production numbers are a huge thing, and so you got to look at that. But you also have to look at the market for a car. There are certain cars that even though they aren't produced in high numbers, there's just not a lot of people looking for those cars. So you just got to make sure you kind of find that sweet spot where there's a lot of people looking for that type of vehicle, but then on top of that, it's a vehicle that there's not that many of. Now, there's a bunch of other categories that still apply that I have talked about in the past. So first off, anything that has an off-road package is always going to do a little bit better in the market. That was something that was happening in the past and it's still happening today, but at a much more extreme rate. So think about stuff like Ford Raptor, Toyota 4Runner, Toyota Tacoma, even the Ram TRX. I mean, it's crazy. Anything that has an off-road package just does really well used. And so if you're looking at trucks and SUVs, if you want something that you're going to be able to drive for free, you want to look at things that have an off-road type package. And the more hardcore off-roady it is, typically the better it's going to do. Again, a really good example is look at the resale value of like a base model SR5 Toyota 4Runner. Then look at the resale value of a Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. The TRD Pro will pretty much sell for MSRP used for a few years, and especially right now in this market, they're selling, some of them are selling above MSRP used. But then you look at an SR5 and it'll go down a little bit. It still hold its value really well, but it won't hold its value nearly as well as like a TRD Pro. So the more specialized it is towards the off-road, chances are the better the resale value. And then if you are kind of like a sports car enthusiast, all that kind of stuff, things that are extremely popular, and this trend is going to continue for a long time, is manual transmissions. If you purchase a car that has a manual transmission, the value is going to be crazy. I think a really good example is something that I looked at in the past that I kind of regret not buying when I had the chance to buy it, and that was an Audi R8 V10 with a gated manual. So pre-COVID, I actually got offered to buy one with 60,000 miles on it for about $80,000. And right now, the market value on that car that I got offered to buy is about $110,000 to $120,000. Yes, I'm kicking myself for not buying it. And at the time, I just couldn't make sense of it for the channel. And obviously, I couldn't see into the future and see that the market was going to go crazy. But any car that has a manual transmission, that is something that is going to hold its value really well. And that'll even continue after this whole market situation ends where things are crazy with the car values. So if you're a sports car enthusiast, I would recommend looking into cars that have manual transmissions. Oh, I hate to be the bringer of bad news, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't buy this type of car, but obviously if you're watching this video, you want to be able to drive a car for free, and these cars aren't necessarily going to be that good for that. And that's going to be your what you'd classify as like commuter type cars. So if it's not something, again, that's like super specialized, it's probably not going to do great in the market right now. It might hold its value, but chances are it'll depreciate just at a slower rate than what it did in the past. So any type of sedan or any type of like just smaller size car, anything that is not a truck or an SUV or a sports car, is just not going to do as great. Again, you won't lose as much money as what you lost in the past, but those aren't the type of cars that are appreciating or basically just sticking in value. Again, unless it's specialized. Like I recently purchased a Ford Focus RS. That's the type of car that's, again, fits in that category of there's not that many out there. Demand for it's still very high, and it has a manual transmission on top of that. And so unless it's, again, more of like a specialized type car, if it is any sort of commuter type car, if you want to drive a car for free, I would take it off your list. Now that you know what types of cars to look into in terms of the vehicles that you can currently drive for free right now, what can you actually do to make sure that you're buying a car good enough that you would be able to drive it for free? So again, I'm going to make a full detailed video in terms of how to negotiate car purchases with the current market. So again, if you're not subscribed, go subscribe so then you can see that video once that video posts. But there are a few things I will say in this video. So first off, if you can find new and you can get a good enough deal on a new car, and again, that video, I'll be talking about how to get a good deal on it. If you can get a good enough deal on a new car, that is the route to go right now. So for example, with this Ram TRX, I got this truck for MSRP, and I know some people, again, that are always about, oh, you have to get a discount off of MSRP, this and that. In the current market, it's not feasible for every single vehicle. I got this truck for MSRP. I have a bunch of friends in the car business, and they are telling me how much vehicles are selling for at auction. So this is a wholesale value. This isn't a retail value. And a truck that had similar miles to mine and less options than mine, so wasn't as loaded up, sold for $110,000 at auction. I got this truck for less than 95 grand. I literally could just go and ship this off to the auction and make $15,000. That's how crazy the market is. And again, if you can find new vehicles and you can get them at sticker, if it fits in the categories that I just told you prior. The used car is going to be a little bit different just because it's going to be harder to find a deal on a used car than it is going to be on a new car. The market for used cars is, again, it's just crazy. I mean, look at the fact that I can go and buy a brand new TRX for MSRP, but if I want to buy a used TRX, I have to pay over MSRP. There is not a single used TRX out there on the market, unless it's Street Speed 717s that was completely destroyed. Aside from his, if the truck has a clean title and hasn't been completely wrecked, you cannot buy a used TRX for anything more or anything less than rather like $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 over MSRP. It's crazy. So it's harder to find deals on used cars. There are a few things that you can do. So first off, and this is going to be in the next video talking about building a relationship with a dealer, you need to find a dealer that you have a really good relationship with. So then that dealer can find you a car at a really good value, and then in turn, you would be able to drive it for free or make a little bit of money on it. And that's going to sum things up for today's video. And again, I will be making a follow-up video talking about what you should do to negotiate in today's current market. If you're not subscribed already, I really appreciate if you would subscribe. And then again, if you want to have kind of like one-on-one advice with car buying, I'll include a link to the Patreon in the description of this video, and it's also in the About page with the YouTube channel. With all that being said, I'll see all of you in the next video.